Hello, everyone. It's Tuesday night, and I am so delighted to have this opportunity to introduce you to my writing friend, Andrea Christenson. And this is going to be really fun because you met Rachel Russell a few weeks ago, and Andrea writes in the same series that Rachel does. And I just finished reading her first book in that series, the Deep Haven series. Can't Buy Me Love. And let me tell you, I sat down and I basically read it in one sitting on Sunday afternoon. It was so good. I really enjoyed the characters. So Andrea, it's great to have you here tonight. Would you like to take a moment and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I'm Andrea Christenson, and I am a Sunrise published author now. My husband and my two daughters, we live in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I guess I should have prepared what I was going to say because now I feel like, oh, I'm stumbling over my words. But we enjoy traveling together, and we enjoy spending time together. So just super excited to have now published my second book with Sunrise and get to talk about Can't Buy Me Love and talk about Hanging by a Moment.
So tell me a little bit about how you became an author with Susie and Sunrise Publishing, because that's kind of a unique process. So what was it like for you?
Sure. Yeah. It is a unique process because they are a boutique publisher. Sunrise Publishing is boutique publisher is how they self-describe. And they have such a neat approach. They take debut authors such as myself, and they pair them with mentor authors in order to help train authors as well as to just publish fun new books. So I had to audition for the role. Susie Warren is one of my writing superheroes, and the opportunity to think, oh my goodness, I can write with Susie, that was just, it was such an honor to think about. And so I sent in an application, and they did a blind audition, and I was one of the top ones picked along with Rachel and Michelle. And then they contacted us and said, hey, are you interested in continuing with this process, because we think you might do well writing for Deep Haven novels. And of course I was very thrilled to be chosen. And so then after we were had signed our contracts, then we all got together and kind of brainstormed our books together so that we didn't overlap too much or miss something or
So what was that process like? Because brainstorming is one of my favorite parts of writing. There's such a synergy and an energy that happens when you've got creatives together and they're just bouncing ideas off each other. So what was that process like for you?
Yeah, well, it is so fun. I'm definitely a little more of an extrovert. So like having people around and whatnot kind of gets me going anyway. And so then to have all these high-minded ideas of how we wanted to write things in was great. So we had all started, all three of us, for our first books with kind of a small idea of what we wanted to do, kind of a story concept more than any sort of actual plot line or any of that. Some people ask me if I had already written this book before signing with Sunrise, as you would do in a more traditional route, but I had not. And I had not necessarily even envisioned a full story until we had gotten together. So it just was kind of a nugget of an idea. And then we were able to flesh it out together. So Susie has a very wonderful formulaic way to write books. And so not formulaic, that makes it sound rote, but she has helpful ways to think about your plot lines and whatnot. And so we were able to fill those out together.
The Lindy Hop is something that I still use with just about every book. And then the story equation, when I'm trying to figure out, okay, what's really going on behind my characters and motivating them and everything they're doing. And so I agree. Anytime I can sit down and listen to Susie Warren talking about craft, you better believe I am in the front row. I am sitting there with my laptop, fingers sliding, because there's just so much richness there. So what was it like? Because you said she's one of your heroes, and I would agree, her books are phenomenal. So was that intimidating because she's also one of the most welcoming people I know. So
Mhm.
were you able to kind of balance out, oh my gosh, this is one of my writing heroes, with, oh my gosh, now I get to learn how to write with her?
Right. Yeah. So I had known her a little bit from various conferences we'd been to together. I mean, I wouldn't say that I knew her well, but I knew that she was a gracious person. So that helped
Yeah.
to get to know her that way. But then when we were all together, we had a writing retreat in Arizona, and just the generosity of her time and her ideas, and even generosity with her characters, she made it so easy to just join in, and so easy to feel confident. She said, you know, every character has their own kind of feel, but every character is going to see characters in a different way. So I may have written this person this way, but someone else might find that to be a little arrogant or whatever. So you can play with the characters just a little bit that way through the eyes of your own character in order to make it make sense for you.
Yeah. Well, and that's such a great lesson to learn with your debut novel and writing in a group, because that's what can make it so interesting is, you know, we might know a character or think we know them really well from their point of view and from the hero or the heroine's point of view of them. But now you're getting kind of those secondary perspectives, and it does allow a little tweaking, because what I might find really charming and cute, you might find mildly offensive and put offish. And so to have her say, hey, you can do that because everyone's going to perceive something a little differently, that
Right.
must have felt like a little bit of freedom to play.
Yes, it definitely did feel that way, because as long as we let the characters be true to themselves, the way that the other characters viewed them could change a bit. I could add a little conflict even, you know, maybe my character sees one of Susie's characters as being a little arrogant, but she wrote him to be more confident. And then we can play with that a little bit until finally my character sees him as the confidence instead of the arrogance or whatnot. So it kind of was a fun way to learn how to do some of that interplay.
Absolutely. So we've got a little bit of a Susie May Warren fan club going in the comments, because Kate is going, yes, she's amazing.
Yes.
And we've got several people popping in to say hello, that you're a new to them author, which is so fun. I love that when I get to introduce people to new to them authors. And Kate Angela was saying, yes, she agrees with me that Can't Buy Me Love was unput downable. So you now have two people, for those of you who are watching or listening, that are saying this is a fantastic book. So now I want you to kind of set it up for us a little bit. So in like 2 minutes, tell us why this is a book that we should invest an afternoon or a few hours in reading, because it really was fantastic.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yeah, so I would describe Can't Buy Me Love as a hints of a modern day Cinderella story, where there is Adrian Vassos, who's a wealthy millionaire playboy, and then there is Ella Bradley, who is she's a housekeeper and she makes cleaning products, and they have conflict between the two things. Adrian comes to town, to Deep Haven, to try to set up something that Ella is completely opposed to, and so then they have to work together. And they both actually spend a night in the local jail, and then they have to serve together on a community service team, and kind of learn to work together that way and whatnot. So
I loved that. I actually really, really loved that as a setup, because you know, there's no other way that those two would get together. There's just not. I mean, they're so different. And so it made it feel very real, and it gave them each an opportunity to say, or to kind of get the person behind the perception. And so to see who they really are, not just what everybody says they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then the thing that I really wanted to focus on through the book was kind of the learning to trust each other, and learning to trust God, learning to let go of past hurts and some of those things. So it's not a super deep book, but I do hope that people kind of take away some of those little tidbits as well.
Well, and I don't want you to go, it's not a super deep book, because it's fun and it's got real conflict. And so there's actually there's layers to it that sometimes I think as the author we miss, because that's like tomorrow I'm going and I'll be interacting with a book club about one of my books. And I honestly don't remember today if it's Flight Risk or Lethal Intent or which one it is. But what I love about interacting with book clubs is that they always see things in a story that as the author, I missed. And so I really saw it as stepping into identity and stepping out of what everybody says you are and stepping into the reality of who you can be, how God sees you, how other people see you, because so many of us live these limited lives, and they're not limited by necessarily other people, but what we think other people are thinking about us or what they've said about us in the past. And so I thought that was such a rich layer. And even with the stepsister, because you've got a stepsister in there, and she's even been limited by how other people have told her she has to feel.
Yes. I'm glad you picked up on some of those pieces, because you know, as an author, you hope to weave some of that stuff in, but you're never quite sure if you've been successful and not just jammed in the lesson outside of the story. So.
Well, and Christy is saying that Can't Buy Me Love was a fun one right out of the gate because the shoes. And
yes.
I loved that setup, the Cinderella story and the shoes and how it ends up being Once Left Behind. And it was just so fun, such a fun way to set up, but yet a fresh take on it, which sometimes, I mean, is that intimidating? You're taking on Cinderella, for goodness sakes.
Yeah, a little bit. It helps that I wasn't trying to do a whole Cinderella story, just more like little nods to it, or almost like an Easter egg here and there of Cinderella. And originally I kind of had a lot of more cheesy moments of Cinderella-y stuff that I kind of pulled back on, so that it was, you know, I wanted it to have a hint of magic without actually being, you know, real magic, because Deep Haven is a world that exists without outside of magic or whatever. Yeah. So, but I think there were some opportunities there to really kind of add in some of that glow, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And yet it was done subtly. I mean, it was really woven in such a beautiful way, because if it gets heavy-handed, that's when it's easy for me to set a book aside and I'm like, oh, I'll get back to it. Right. And yet yours, I literally sat down and read in like 3 hours. And I'm a pretty fast reader, but I don't often give myself the space to just sit down and inhale a book. So that tells you how much fun I was having with it. So really well done. And it was, because I often will struggle with just like straight romance, and yet there was enough other stuff and layers into it that it really captured my attention and my heart. So well done. Okay, so we all love Cinderella stories. I have the next book, but I'll admit I haven't had a chance to read it yet. It's sitting on my Kindle waiting for me. So who did you pick up? Because Deep Haven is a place that people who've read Susie's stories and love them, love Deep Haven. I mean, it's one of those places that I'm like, oh, it would be so much fun to actually go into the wilds of Minnesota and small town life and all of that. Yeah. So what was your next angle? Because this is a pre-existing town, pre-existing characters to a certain extent. Did you bring people from outside again, or this time did you switch to some people that we might be familiar with from the other books?
Yeah, good question. It's actually 50-50. So the the hero is Jack Stewart, and he comes from outside of town. Excuse me. But the heroine is actually Colleen Decker from the You Don't Know Me that Susie had written. Yeah. She was a teenager the last time we saw her, and now she's all grown up, and so she has to learn what it's like to be a grown up in Deep Haven, and learn she's how to break free from some of her high school some high school bad attitudes and whatnot. So
oh, that's great. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I have found that when I go home, it's really easy to fall back into those old patterns and the way we've done things, unless I'm being very intentional and going, I'm not the person I was, not that I did anything wrong, but even just within my nuclear family, being like, this is the role Cara has played, so this is the role I must play now. And so it's fun that you were exploring that. So what was the biggest challenge writing her?
Yeah, well, so it was kind of funny because I had said, oh, maybe we'll take Colleen because Colleen could be a nurse, and for reasons that you'll find out, we needed a nurse to come back to Deep Haven, and it seemed like something that she would have done with her life after being kind of, you know, athletic, and maybe she would have thought about being a personal trainer, but then she has some things happen that may or may not have made it into the book now that I think about it. But anyway, her course was as a nurse, and but Susie does not like Colleen as a character. She was like, I wrote her as a bratty kid, and she was always sassing her mom and getting into trouble, and she didn't appreciate Tucker Newman, her boyfriend in high school. And I said, well, give me a chance to redeem Colleen, and we'll see if we can take some of her sassiness and stubbornness and turn it into tenacity and into resiliency and some of those positive qualities that can come from your sort of teenage sassy girls. So
That's awesome. So Susie Oakley has posted a comment that she just finished Can't Buy Me Love today, and it was so good. But I love what she did. She asked her library to get all of the Deep Haven books and all of the new ones. And so that's such a great thing for readers to do. I mean, I can't tell you how many authors I've discovered at the library, and I consider it a personal favor when readers will ask their libraries to carry my books, or I will often ask our library system to carry other Christian authors, because if you ask, they often will. And I think especially during the pandemic and everything, it's been such a good way for people to be able to find books and things like that. And so what's one thing or two things that you would ask readers to do? What would be helpful if they've discovered your books and they love your stories? What is something that's really encouraging and helpful to you?
Well, for sure, the library thing. You know, at my library, we each, everyone who has a library card there gets 5 suggestions a month. So I try to make it my personal goal to suggest up to all 5 every month. And I have had maybe one get rejected, I think. And I think it was because they'd already purchased the book. So
that's awesome.
I know, right? So oftentimes that can be such a great way for new readers to learn about new authors, like you said. But then I also heard a really encouraging story lately. A gal that went to my mom's, hi mom, I think you're on, her Bible study. She bought a handful of books and passed them around to her friends and said, the only caveat is you have to pass them on from here. And I think so often readers think that authors only want book sales all the time. But what we really want is for people to read what we've written, for people to read what we've really poured our hearts into. And so it was so honoring to me that she would do that, and then she would ask her friends to share those books around. And so those 5 books maybe turned into 20 people who have read it, or 30 people who have read it. And so it was such a privilege to me to hear about that.
That's awesome. And you know, it can be easy to go, oh, a sale would be better. But I will take books that I have, and when my bookshelves get full, as you can see from the ones behind me there, I will take the extra books that I've read and that I might have passed around, and I'll take them to free little libraries, or I'll take them to churches that have libraries and places like that. Because then if someone reads one, they may go through and buy the others. They may not want to wait. And so it's a great way to help expose people to the books. And then word of mouth is just so critical. And I think it's easy to underestimate how helpful that really is for authors. So what's one of the things that you really have walked away from this process? Because Can't Buy Me Love was your first book. And then you've written the second one, and now you guys just got extended for another set, which is yay, that's so awesome.
So exciting.
What's something that you would say is like the number one takeaway that you wish you had known when you were starting to write?
Oh boy. Well, one thing that I've been learning from Susie is that you can always take a story a little bit deeper. You know, you can always create a tiny bit more conflict. You can always have just a little more revelation for the characters near the end. You can always have a little more emotion. You can always have a little more of everything. You can go a little deeper. And that's kind of been my mantra as I go through. I think, okay, how can I make the scene just a little deeper? You know, it doesn't have to be a huge change, or it doesn't have to be the world's greatest novel or whatnot, but to just take it just a little bit deeper for the benefit of the persons who are going to be reading that story.
You know, that is the advice that my agent kept giving me for years, because I wrote my 36th or 37th book just came out today. And there were a lot of years where I was writing 3 or 4 books a year while doing other things. And she kept going, go deeper, go deeper. And it took me a while to figure that out. But Susie's system really is a great way. When you do the story equation, you're looking at the lie and the wound and the dark moment. And one of them that I always struggle with, which I think is so funny, is what's the happiest moment that your character has had? Right. And Beth Boat was like, okay, so you need to start keeping a happy moment journal. And I'm like, sure. How weird is that? Most people would be like, I don't know what it feels like to be like really depressed. I'm like, happy moments, you just keep going, you know? So is there one of those that's been more difficult for you to incorporate in your writing? Or was there like this aha moment where you're like, oh, now I get it?
Yeah, no, Susie talks a lot about using stakes to enhance your writing. And if you've ever taken any classes from her, you'll know that it's stakes, stakes, stakes. Like what are the bad things that will happen if the character's goal is not met in this chapter, and what are the good things that will happen if the character's goal is met in this chapter? And sometimes they're external stakes, and sometimes they're internal stakes, and sometimes that can be a little tricky. You know, I need a character to just do a thing. Like I was teasing with my girls that one time I just needed a character to go to dinner with the other family. That's all I needed. I didn't need any stakes. I just I needed that to happen in order for the later thing to happen. But of course, Susie is not content with that. Like something has to happen. Maybe something happens so that person doesn't go to dinner, or like what would happen if at dinner the table collapsed, or, you know, you can't just have just a simple action. It needs to be grounded in kind of more of the what ifs, what if good, what if bad, and really digging into the heart of why this person is acting in that way.
Yeah, that's work. It's so much easier just to be like, oh, I just need them to move from here to here. To then go, oh, okay, so why? And if there's nothing happening internally, then it probably just needs to go away. Mm-hmm. And it's something that you can internalize and kind of start doing automatically, but it takes a while because it's work.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep. Exactly. So, yeah. Go ahead.
So when you're writing, do you see it playing out in front of you? Do you hear your characters talking? What's that process like for you?
I do see it to some extent, especially when I'm really in the zone. I don't talk to my characters. You know, some people will say, oh, I had a conversation with them this morning and this is what we talked about or whatever. I haven't found that to be useful. It's maybe a tool that I'll be able to develop in the future, but I definitely, when I'm really deep into it, I will see what is happening and I'm able to kind of get that out on the page. And then if someone tries to talk to me, then I'll just give them this sort of blank stare, because I'm not really there in my house. I'm actually in Deep Haven and I can't think about what we're having for supper because, you know, my character is in the middle of a conflict. So
that's awesome. It's so much fun when you hit that flow point where you're just like, I am so in it that it's hard to come back out of story world and into the real world, you know, what's for dinner and where do the kids need to be next and all of that. So what's the craziest thing you've had to research so far?
Well, in Hanging by a Moment, there's a medical procedure that has to happen that is kind of spoilery if I say too much about it, but it's a fairly complicated leg procedure that I Googled and then I had to keep Googling it because I didn't know how to find it in a normal medical journal or something until finally someone had posted a photo and some really gross pictures where I was able to really dig into pardon the pun, but really dig into the surgery and write it hopefully somewhat authentically. So yeah, that was probably my trickiest one to have to track down.
Yeah, it's funny the things that we end up doing for the sake of story. Like
Right.
I intentionally did not go to medical school because I fainted at everything for a long time. And so I was like, this would not be good. That wouldn't be good for me to faint if I had to, do something. And
Yes.
yet Lethal Intent has actually been called a medical thriller. And I'm like,
Right.
what are the odds? What are the odds? And yet I had to do all this research and was talking to oncologists and, digging into CAR T cell research and all this stuff because I'm like, I had to know it in order to be able to write it authentically. And so it feels like we're getting all these degrees and certifications that we don't get any credit for.
Right. Yes. Yes. I would say my third book is that will be coming out a whole year from now. So, but that one has been fun to research because that one takes place in a bakery. So I get to do like bakery research and cook things in the kitchen so that I can see like what it actually tastes like or what it really, what would really happen if you combine the wrong ingredient or whatever. So
Oh,
that's
how funny.
maybe more fun than the
Yeah.
medical journals for nasty surgical procedures.
Yeah, I'm glad you weren't practicing that on yourself or really
Yes.
family members.
Come here, honey.
Yeah, let me just try this out. We'll see what it really feels like.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Yes, I'm with you. I think the bakery research would be much more fun.
Much more fun. Yeah. Yeah.
So several people are commenting on, how your research is impressive and that readers are thankful for that because it really does make it more authentic. I can tell when someone's kind of shortcutted and it'll often pull me out of the story. And then it's hard to dive back in. So it really is worth it. And Susie says she's destined to write a book with a baker in it someday. So
yes.
What's the craziest thing you had to bake or cook for the purpose of your story?
One of the things that I wanted to do was have kind of a signature bake for this bakery to have. And so I found this really weird, I don't even know what it was supposed to taste like, but this really weird like Dutch, I think it was meant to taste kind of like a donut, but it swims in a creme anglaise. So it was kind of a pastry-ish thing. And when we were eating it, my family and I, they were very polite about the situation, but since we had no idea what it was supposed to taste like, it was very, I will not be making that again. That will not be the baker's signature bake because it was like a piece of bread dough floating on this like milky whatever. It was not good. I was completely wrong. I don't know if I did it wrong or not, but I'll never know.
That's hilarious. The things we do for our books.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
So, and Teresa says it must be music to your ears to be able to say my third book.
Yes. Yes. Oh my goodness. It's so unbelievable. Like I still am pinching myself that is what is happening. And when the contract, the first contract was sort of the 2 books. And so when I received a contract for the 3rd book, I actually came running to my husband's office. We live on the same campus where his office is. And I stood in his doorway and I just was crying. And he's like, is this good or is this bad? What is happening? I said, it's good. They want me to write another one. And just the thought that people were entertained by something that I had written on a page and wanted more of it was such an honor and such a dream come true. So
that's awesome. Well, congratulations. And for those who have been tuning in, I really enjoyed Can't Buy Me Love and can't wait to dive into the next one. And so I highly recommend them. Thank you so much for joining me, Andrea. It was so fun to get to know you better and learn more about your journey and your books. And congratulations. It's wonderful to see them doing so well.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right. And next week, Bessie St. Amant will be here talking about her brand new book, Tacos for Two. So there's a food theme going, but thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. And I hope you enjoyed meeting Andrea and learning more about her books.